Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Batra. We are up to Perek Daled Mishnah Aleph. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Rai, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avde ben Chaim Lechaim v'derefua Shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betor Shach Cholei Yisrael, and Achlama Merav Binyamin Or Tzion Chai ben Dvorah. The first three Mishnayot of this chapter teach what is included in the sale of a house. Hamocheret habayit lo machar hayatzia. If someone sells a house, he has not sold the shed that is attached to the wall of the house. Vafal pishi pitucha detocho. Even if it opens into the house, the shed is considered a separate structure, and therefore it is not included in the sale. In those times, it was common to build shed-like buildings called yitzias attached to the rear walls of houses, which were used as porches or extra rooms. Although the shed can be entered through the house and is used together with the house, it is still considered a separate property that is not sold with the house. However, this is true only if the shed is larger than 4 amot square. Smaller sheds are not significant enough to be considered separate properties and are therefore included in the sale of the house. Nor has he sold the storage room that is within the house itself. Even though the storage room is inside the house, it is not used in the same way as the house, and therefore it is not sold. This type of room was used for storage of valuables rather than living space, so it is not included with the sale of the house. Although the storage room, unlike the Yitzia, is actually included inside the house, and one must walk through the house to enter it, it is still not included in the sale. Nor has he sold the right to use the rooftop for drying fruits or produce if it has a fence of at least 10 tvachim in height surrounding it. The right to use a fenced-in rooftop was sometimes sold separately from the house, and therefore the right to use it is not automatically included in the sale. In those times, roofs were often flat, and they were used as a place to dry produce. If the roof had a 10 tefach fence, the rooftop is a significant property on its own, and the right to use it is not included with the sale of the house. If there is no 10 tefach fence, however, the rooftop obviously was not being used by the seller, and therefore the right to use it is included in the sale as it is considered part of the house. Another Tana extends this exclusion even further. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im yesh lo tzurat petach afal pi she'eno gavoa asar tvachim. If there is a doorway leading from the house to the roof, then even if the fence around the roof is not 10 tvachim high, and no machul, the right to use the roof is not sold along with the house. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if there is a doorway to the roof, that is enough to establish the roof as a significant area in its own right, and it is therefore not included with the sale of the house. The Rav does tell us, Venachak Rabbi Yehuda, that Rachad does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And that is the end of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet continues to discuss which items are included in the standard sale of a house. Lo et habor velo et adut. Someone who sells a house has sold neither the pit nor the cistern that is under the house. Pits and cisterns were both used to store water. The difference between them is that a pit is simply a hole dug in the ground, while a cistern was lined with stones. Even if he wrote to the buyer in the bill of sale that he was selling him the heights and the depths of the house, although this clause does give the buyer certain rights in the spaces above and beneath the house, it does not give him separate structures with specific functions like a pit or cistern. If the bill of sale states that the seller sold the heights and the depths of the house, this gives the buyer the right to increase the height of the house by building additional stories, and also the right to dig beneath the house if he wishes. However, it does not give him the pit or cistern, since these are separate structures whose function is different from that of the house. In order to include these, the seller must write in the bill of sale that he is including from the depths of the earth to the heights of the sky. The Mishnah now discusses a practical problem. The pit still belongs to the seller, but it is located under the house that he just sold. How is he supposed to get to his pit? The Mishnah says to dispute about this. And the seller must buy himself a path to regain access to his pit. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that a seller sells with a generous eye, meaning he sells his property without holding anything back. Therefore, when he sold the house, he did not keep any rights in the property for himself, even those he might need later. Therefore, although the pit is still his, he must repurchase the right to access it from the buyer of the house. But the sages say, he need not buy himself a path to the pit because he never included it in the sale. According to the sages, a seller sells with a stingy eye, holding back any rights that he may require later. Therefore, when he sold the house, he kept the right to access his pit and does not need to purchase a path to it from the buyer. Now, this dispute does not pertain only to a pit or cistern. It is a general dispute that pertains to many instances where a property is sold and items or rights are retained. For example, whether or not one who retained the right to use a rooftop would have to purchase a path to access the roof would also be subject to this dispute. Now, the Mishnah teaches that in a different case, the rulings of Rabbi Akiva and the sages will be reversed based on their respective reasons. Micharan la'acher, if one sold the pit or cistern beneath his house to another person, but kept the house for himself, the rulings are switched. Rabbi Akiva says the buyer does not need to buy himself a path in this case because the seller of the pit or cistern sold it with a generous eye. I'm sorry, we actually have to go back a little bit in the Mishnah. The Mishnah presents a case where there is no dispute. Just to go back a little bit, we cut a little bit of the Mishnah. Umodeh Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva agrees Bizman she'amar lo chutz me'elu, that if the seller said to the buyer, I am selling you the house except for these, meaning except for the pit or cistern, sheno tzich likach lo derech, that he does not have to buy himself a path, since the pit or cistern would not have been sold in any case, for the pit or cistern are not included in a standard sale. We say that he included this extra clause in order to keep a path for himself, even though the extra clause does not explicitly mention the path. The fact that the seller said it shows that he wanted to keep something extra for himself, and in this case we say that his intention was to keep the path that he needs. Now, what we are reading in the Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches again that in a different case, the rulings of Rabbi Akiva and the sages will be reversed based on their respective reasons. Mechan la'acher, if one sold the pit or cistern beneath his house to another person, but he kept the house for himself, the rulings are switched. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says the buyer does not need to buy himself a path in this case because the seller of the pit or cistern sold it with a generous eye and included a path in the sale. While the sages say that the buyer must purchase a path because the seller of the pit or cistern sold it with a stingy eye and did not include a path. And the Rav tells us, V'alacha ki Rabbi Akiva, the Halacha does follow the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And that is on the Batra of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.